In 2023 or 24, I turned off AEW forever, and forever lasted until last night. I returned, and I was pleasantly surprised. If you're like, what is this AEW? It's a rival promotion. It's the number 2 promotion out there. Now, this is an AEW video, but this will not be a crap on WWE video. I'm still very much I still very much have not given up on WWE, but after a couple decisions that WWE have been doing lately, I thought I needed to cleanse my palate, and why not with AEW? Because I've been hearing rumblings of a renaissance in AEW, actually, because while I did turn it off, I never stopped keeping up to date with it and watching highlights. And from what I've been hearing lately and what I've actually been seeing and the little that I did see, I could tell that something has been changing over there, and it's kind of crazy. When WWE kind of goes down, AEW kind of goes up, and vice versa. And that's actually why I think I'm going to start giving more attention to AEW. I'm not going to be doing a ton of AEW videos. I am predominantly going to be a WWE channel, but maybe one day a week, if this video does well, I could see myself doing an AEW Thursdays or AEW Fridays, one video a week. So you guys, you gals, you let me know if you want me to continue doing AEW videos. If you are an AEW fan and only an AEW fan, I ask you not to just engage in arguments with WWE fans about how WWE sucks and vice versa. All you WWE fans out there, don't just come at me saying how horrible AEW is. I'm okay with criticisms, but I think it has to be fair criticism. I was on a Twitter account, actually. They were just taking a dump on a Kenny Omega segment from last night, and I'm like, wait a second, none of this happened. All of your critiques mean nothing because they're saying things that just did not apply. We'll go over that in a second. First off, though, I do want to welcome any AEW viewer to this channel. I do give away a belt at every 10,000 subscribers. I don't have an AEW belt, but I promise you, if this video gets 1,000 views, I'll do another AEW video next week. Every time, and if I get 1,000 views for every AEW video 4 weeks in a row, I'll make it a permanent thing. And then I'll go and get an AEW belt to give away on this channel. So, but until then, I have this WCW big gold belt. AEW does kind of remind me of WCW back in the day. I'll explain later. But yeah, so I give it away every 10,000 subscribers, almost at 20,000, hit 17,000 today. Thank you, everybody. Guys, gals, you're awesome. All you got to do to win is comment below. You got to also subscribe to the channel, hit that bell, ding, 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 notification, and give a thumbs up to this video, and you can win this belt. I'm trying to quit my day job, honestly, and added bonus, if I do quit my day job, I'll be able to produce WWE and AEW videos. I'll start a whole new channel if you really want me to, just for AEW content. All right, so let's talk yesterday. Yesterday was like a 4-hour episode of Dynamite. Dynamite is their Monday Night Raw, right? And I believe what happened here is that it's actually AEW Dynamite and AEW Collision together, because Collision is their Smackdown, and that's usually on Saturdays. And I think what they did is, for some reason, they're not going to have a show on Saturday, so they took their Collision and just stacked it onto Dynamite, and we had a 4-hour block of wrestling. That's a little too much. I don't like 3 hours of SmackDown. I really think, for whatever reason, you couldn't air Collision. You probably should have just not aired it and not made Dynamite 4 hours. I think that was just a little much, but overall, though, it was a good product. It started off with a half-an-hour banger. It was Will Ospreay versus Swerve Strickland. Now, Swerve actually used to be in WWE. God, I loved him, and I thought he had so much potential, but unfortunately, he was released, and he was snatched up by Tony Khan before Triple H was able to rehire him. And so that was a lost opportunity. Definitely a lost opportunity, because when Swerve came out, the dude feels like a big freaking deal. Now, this might be sacrilege to AEW viewers out there, but honestly, I think his Prince Nana manager is distracting. He's like, I get it, he has that Swerve thing going on, but I don't know, I just don't like that dynamic. To me, was just a little too jarring, because Swerve feels like the serious big deal, and so maybe I need to see more of them together for me to fall in love with this combo. But to me, I found it just a little too jarring. They're too different of characters for them to be hanging around each other. But it's not that huge a deal. I don't think it subtracted from Swerve too much, and whatever. So we have this great match. This was my first Will Ospreay match that I've really seen, because he did come during my period of absence from AEW. And I mean, it's not my first ever, because I've seen highlights and stuff, but this was my first time actually sitting down and watching 30 minutes of Will Ospreay in an AEW ring. And it delivered. He lived up to the hype. This was a very good match. One criticism AEW gets that I will say I do kind of agree with is that they were doing too many power moves. Like, there was like neck breakers, there was like pile drivers, there was all these like really like finishers that were just happening over and over and over again, that I'm like, how are these guys even alive, let alone kicking out of finishers? But that said, in the moment when the adrenaline is flowing and you're like, holy crap, it was exciting. And WWE is guilty of it too. More and more lately, I've been seeing just like these huge moves not being finishers. What's a Mexican destroyer? It's literally a pile driver. And like Kevin Owens puts a pile driver on Randy Orton. He's gone for 3 months, but Penta does it on Chad Gable, and Chad Gable's kicking out. So it's like WWE is not immune to it. That said, just because everybody does it doesn't mean I like it. I would like them to pull back just a little for the overall bigger picture, but I don't want to also be the guy that just walks in and says, change that, change that, change that. I'm just telling you what my initial impressions are, and I did enjoy it though. When it's all said and done, I very much enjoyed the matchup between Will and Swerve. And what was even crazier is I was able to get into the match because there was not 53 advertisements. I'm not even talking about the ring itself, that was just being covered in advertisements. I'm actually talking about the breaks to commercials. I think there were 2 breaks, but it was a 30-minute match. They went all the way to a draw. I do think that maybe they should have announced throughout the match when there was 5 minutes left. I think the announcer should have just said 5 minutes to go, 1 minute to go, 30 seconds to go. I think that would have added a lot of drama to the matchup. But from what the announcers were saying, it seemed like Swerve was unaware, because it was definitely going towards the side of Swerve. Swerve seemed like he was about to win, and it seems like the story here was Swerve was unaware that the time limit draw was about to happen, so that's why he didn't win. And maybe if there was an announcer saying stuff, Swerve would have tried harder, and then he would have been forced to win. So maybe that's the justification of not saying it. But if you are going to use the stipulation of a draw, which is technically still in WWE Universe rules, but WWE has not done a draw in forever, that I would totally do it. I would totally use it. I would milk the draw and just announce it. 5 minutes to go, 4 minutes to go, 3 minutes to go. That would have put the crowd in a frenzy. So that's a small critique. Good match overall. And then after, we had the Death Riders come out. The Death Riders, I think the Death Riders name is a little like, I don't know, it feels like 2 kids on the playground trying to come up with a cool gang name. We gotta be like the Killer Bees, because killer, that sounds tough. We're the Killer Bees. And then you realize, no, it doesn't sound tough when you say it like that. And that's kind of what the Death Riders are to me. It feels like that name is like, trying a little too hard. But overall, overall, they come out and their presentation was decent. I've been hearing a lot of, Dean Ambrose is, not Dean, sorry, AEW fans clicking off of this channel. Jon Moxley, sorry, he'll always be Dean Ambrose to me. Hopefully, maybe not, we'll see. Jon Moxley, I've been hearing a lot of negative things about him and how he's like bringing down the company, how the angle sucks, but honestly, I thought this was okay. I didn't see any real problems with Jon Moxley's presentation here. He comes out like thugs, and then the Young Bucks, they come out and they go to super kick Swerve with spiked or thumbtacked shoes on, and Will takes a bullet for him. That was good camera work right there. I did not see that coming. I did not see Will jumping in, and so he took a bullet for Swerve, and it was really good camera work. And the cool thing was, when the Young Bucks did kick him, it was like, I don't know, it felt like they felt remorse. It was almost like they felt they had gone too far, and people are going to hate me for this, but like, it really reminded me of when the New Age Outlaws during the Attitude Era pushed Cactus Jack and Chainsaw Charlie off of the platform in a dumpster, and suddenly they felt like remorse. It was like, ooh, did we go too far? And that's kind of what the New Bucks, like, that's the vibe they gave off, and they kind of just walked away. And it was just, it was a decent segment. It got me interested. And if you were a first-time viewer, there was like so much going on that I could see being like, okay, I'm going to stick around. I'm going to stick around and see what's happening. So like, they got the hook. Decent opener. And I'm not going to go through the entire show, because that's not what this is about. There was ups, there was downs to the show. I felt like some of the matches, they dragged on a little too long, but I want to tell you guys the things that I really liked about AEW, things that are making me like attracted to the product once again, where I'm thinking I will come back. But before I get into what I feel is unfair criticism of AEW based on the Kenny Omega segment, and what I did like about AEW is the crowd were really into it. You could tell that this crowd, they paid their hard-earned money, and they were enjoying themselves. This was a crowd that did not come to just hate watch, did not come to be disappointed, did not come so they could sit and watch a product that they could then go turn on social media and record about how much garbage it was, all right? This was a crowd that loved wrestling, and they showed up. Now, I don't think I've seen a lot of families there, so this might be more of a, I don't know, like college or 30s crowd, which was very reminiscent of what WCW was when it was getting hot. When WCW was doing their Bash at the Beach and stuff like that, that's what this crowd reminded me of. Also, it was nice to see a full house. I know these arenas are smaller. I've kept up with AEW, but when I turned off AEW, the crowds were small. The crowds were small, and you could tell because the arenas were big. They were overbooking. They were in too big of arenas, and it felt like I don't know, like they were wrestling in a bingo hall. Now, though, they're going to smaller arenas. It's jam-packed, and it feels so much better. This is definitely a case where less is more. I know Tony Khan probably wanted these big arenas so he could fill them up if the opportunity arose, but it was not helping the product a couple years ago. And so for me to come and see a full house, whether or not it was the same attendance, but 4,000 in a building that sits 4,000 is so much better than 6,000 in a building that sits 20,000. So I was very, very happy with the crowd and the way it looked, the way it felt. The crowd was a little too eager to chant, but I don't know. I think that's just a byproduct of today's wrestling culture. And I'm going to be an old man yelling at a cloud like, don't chant "this is awesome" if it's just okay. I know, I'm old. And they do it with WWE too. I think they just do it a little quicker here Then again, you pay your money, you want to chant, go ahead and chant. Another thing that I've heard AEW get a lot of slack for is their bloated roster and how you can't push everybody. But I will say this, I actually think to a point that it might be a benefit, because there was this dude, Mystico, he fought some other guy, right? I can't remember his name right now. However, I could tell that guy had somewhat of an established character. And so when Mystico beat that guy, it actually felt kind of like a big deal. And if you go to WWE, well, WWE does not have a bloated roster. In fact, it feels like they need to hire like 4 or 5 more guys for each show so they can lose. What I mean by that is on Smackdown, you got Damian Priest, right? You want him to be elevated into the main event, but who can he really beat on SmackDown without burying everybody? Well, he can beat Legado del Fantasma and maybe Andrade. After that, there's not many people he can beat. Like, where does he go? He just keeps getting into feuds and fights that end in disqualifications because we don't want to bury the other talent. Okay, well then, I guess he could beat Carmelo Hayes. Well, what about Carmelo Hayes? That dude's the future. I don't want him to lose, but who can Carmelo Hayes then go and beat? There's not many people. Again, Legado del Fantasma and maybe Andrade. But then what about Andrade? You know what I'm saying? So there aren't a lot of people that can face off with each other and actually just have clean victories. Otherwise, we bring in local enhancement talent, but those dudes don't feel like nothing. It almost feels cheap if you beat them, and it doesn't help your character at all. But on AEW, even the lowest person on the card feels like something. And in WCW, back in the day, that was the same way. There was this dude, his name was Roadblock, right? He was a big dude, very like bulky. I think he was like 300. I think they might have said 400 pounds, but he's probably like 320, 350, whatever. And he comes out, his name is Roadblock, so he has a name, a character. He's never been in a feud before, but the way he's presented, he has like this sign, not like a stop sign, but like a structure, a roadblock. Oh, that's why they called him Roadblock. He has this like roadblock structure and he puts it around his neck. He comes out. He feels like, if you're just tuning in, he feels like a character, right? But he's not. He's just a jobber, but he doesn't feel like a jobber. He feels like he's a fleshed out character. And I remember this one time he fought Lex Luger, right? Lex Luger, he kept dropping him. He kept trying to put him in the torture rack. And I think on like the 3rd or 4th try, he got it. And when he did, it felt like a big deal. Lex Luger felt like he had beat somebody important when he did it. Roadblock had never won a fight, but the fact is it felt like Lex Luger accomplished something because there was a character for him to beat. And yes, WCW was very bloated, had a lot of too many contracts, and maybe AEW is the same way, but there is a benefit to it at the same time. All right, and so now I want to go to the unfair criticism that I see online of AEW. So in a vacuum, if I would have just saw this, I would probably be like, oh my God, AEW, like, what are they doing? What amateur hour in a vacuum? But because I know a little more about it, I'm like, wait a second, this is unfair criticism. So they have a match. Kenny Omega is going to be fighting someone, right? And it's a big freaking deal. And in this angle, Kenny Omega is on a stretcher, and what is the guy? Okada, he like comes off the apron and does an elbow onto Kenny Omega, his like this area, and then he just starts coughing up blood. Now I will say it's a little apparent it was a blood capsule or something like that, and it was just a little too much blood, maybe. Whatever. Not the end of the world. And he's coughing up blood and he's going crazy, and so like people on Twitter are having a field day about this, and they're like, that's just from an elbow drop. I'm not going to read the names. And the face you make when you spend more than 2 minutes watching AEW. Well, I spent 4 hours watching AEW, and that's definitely not the face I made. I enjoyed myself, but I will say 2 hours. Don't, Tony Khan, please do not make the mistake that WCW did and WWE by going to 3 or 4 hours. But here's one. The blood aspect loses its impact when 5 of the last 9 segments featured someone bleeding. I watched last night. There were not 5 segments of people bleeding, like straight up. Now, I will say, in the first 2 minutes of the opening match, there was blood, but you could tell that was an accident. Swerve, I think, hit Ospreay, and his nose or mouth legitimately started bleeding. There's nothing you can do about that. If it's a legit and you could be like, oh well, botches, right? No. There have been so many botches lately. Go to a Liv Morgan match. She's almost always bleeding because someone botches and legit hits her in the face. There's been a lot of botches in WWE lately, so I'm not going to sit here and just say that that AEW is the exclusive rights holder of botches. So, for real, there was not 5 times that people bled before this Kenny Omega segment. So what that tells me is that person is judging AEW off of its past. I do recognize that in the past they might have bled too much, and maybe that was even part of the reason why I stepped away. Not because I don't like blood, but because sometimes I think if you do the same thing over and over again, it's the law of diminishing returns. But that said, you can't judge AEW on 2 years ago. You got to judge it on now. And you can't say that this Kenny Omega segment sucked because of the 5 previous segments when there was blood, when there was not blood. It's just not fair. And then we got Mick Foley was thrown off of a 15-foot cage and didn't nearly have as much blood coming from his mouth. And this guy gets it from an elbow drop. All right, let me stop right there. It's not an elbow drop. Yes, it is an elbow drop. However, if you knew the storyline and the predicament behind it, you might understand more. So the Mick Foley thing, that's separate. Okay, fine. Mick Foley, he was thrown off, and he's trying to compare the two, saying, well, one is way more dangerous than the other, so why is there more blood? Well, that's because Kenny Omega actually had a real life-threatening, career-threatening disease. What was it called? I don't know what it was called, something ticulitis. Whatever the case may be, literally, he had to get surgery and stuff. So that's why an elbow can cause that much damage. And that's legit. If you have part of your intestines cut out and someone gives you an elbow to that spot, then, I can see you coughing up blood. I can see there being more blood than the average elbow would provide. So, it's hard, for you to just not mention that. It's kind of misleading. It's kind of misinformation. So that's not cool. This person says, maybe the reason I once enjoyed AEW content was because it was the pandemic. Boredom, a flicker of good in a terrible moment. Watched amidst a gloom of thing that was going around. Their programming was enjoyable, but that was long ago. Reality has returned, and everything they do now is terrible. Ruben, that's the person who did this. I wonder if you were kind of like me, you turned off AEW and you only remember when you turned it off. You might want to check it out again. It was a decent show. And then this person says, it is easier to say who doesn't bleed in AEW. I feel like that's a shorter list. Well, if I was to say that for this episode, I would say everybody except for Will Ospreay, who was an accident, and Kenny Omega, which was part of story and a real life injury angle. Did he steal Ken Shamrock gimmick of getting injured internally every week? That's funny. All right, I'm just gonna, that's funny. This person says, ha ha ha, what a dork, nice acting, Kenny. The acting could have been better, but it wasn't I've seen worse. I've definitely seen worse. Ultimate Warrior did it better back in the day. There you go. Speaking of seeing worse. He's referring to Papa Shango. Papa Shango putting a voodoo curse on Ultimate Warrior. So let's see. What is worse? Papa Shango putting a voodoo curse on the Ultimate Warrior and black ooze coming down his head, or Okada delivering an elbow to a real life injury, internal injury where the guy needed surgery, and then he starts coughing up blood. If you're going to say that the Kenny Omega angle is worse than the Voodoo Curse angle, I think you might have a bias against AEW. Oh, here it is. He suffered from diverticulitis, Diverticiulitis. There you go. All right, so there you go. And again, I feel like whoever's like just ragging on that segment, like, oh my God, one elbow made him bleed that much. That's an unfair statement because you have to like put it all into context. Now, if you want to say, hey, I know he had surgery, but that elbow should not have done that much damage because that surgery was so many years ago, and we've seen him in the ring since taking this kind of damage, that would be a whole different story. If you want to criticize that angle, you got to do it fairly and present all the information. You can't just be like, well, Mankind fell off a 20-foot steel cage and he didn't bleed that much. There's more context to it. So I don't know. I got to say that as somebody who has turned off AEW for a couple years now and only kept up through reviews, I feel my idea of what AEW is and was not the complete picture. So I need to now, I need to really think about how I take in information moving forward on this channel. I'm glad I did not do any AEW videos in that time frame, because had I done an AEW video, it would have been a very negative video, but it would have been based on reviewers who had a negative view of AEW. If I'm going to talk AEW, I need to sit down, watch the product myself, and then talk about it. So, I guess I do owe Tony Khan an apology for having some preconceived notion of it. Now, when I left AEW, it sucked. But what I saw yesterday, not so bad. I think that they are on an upswing. I enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to next week when it's only 2 hours. I think I'll do 4 weeks of AEW, and if each video gets 1,000 views, I'll just keep doing it. I do believe that having a strong competitor to WWE is crucial to the overall product. I think that WWE, when not challenged, they get lazy. I think when not challenged, they do really bad things like firing R-Truth. I think that if we don't have an AEW, we'll probably get more advertisers because they'll just say, where else are they going to go? Well, who else are they going to watch? Well, if there's a challenger, that's who else will watch. And WWE kind of pushed me to having an AEW day on this channel. So let's see how it goes. If you enjoyed this video, please comment that you enjoyed it. If you hated this video, please comment that you hated it. I'm not opposed to just doing AEW content on another channel because this channel has been predominantly WWE. I want to respect each and every one of you viewers out there. So let me know in the comments below how you feel, and have yourselves a great day.